أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to you all for another teachers webinar. My name is Baba Mirza. I am a head teacher in London at the Islamia Primary School, and I'm also the Director of Education for NIDA Trust. And of course, this Muslim Teachers webinar has been brought to you by NIDA Trust. And of course, a weekly webinar every week on a Thursday at 4 o'clock British summertime. And I know that there are lots of you around the country and also the world who are tuning in and also will be tuning in as we progress through this webinar, inshallah. Now, we have a very special guest for us this week, who will be talking about rethinking schooling in the wake of COVID-19 and post-COVID-19. We want to this afternoon not just focus on some of the ways that we can, I suppose, enhance education and enhance schooling whilst COVID-19 is happening, but also, more importantly, when schools open. And I know that lots of people now, governments around the world, are talking about reopening schools. I know for many teachers, this is getting some of us a little bit anxious, but it is inevitable that schools, inshallah, will open. And we now need to think about how we manage that. And this is what Ustadh Edris Khamissa, who is all the way in South Africa, is going to help us discuss, inshallah. Just to give you a background about Ustadh Edris Khamissa. Ustadh Edris Khamissa is an international consultant in education and human development. He began his career as a teacher of English. His passion and expertise for the subject culminated in his nomination as the chairman of the English Society of South Africa. He has been a head teacher of 3 schools. He has conducted numerous workshops in over 30 countries around the world. His topics range from leadership, youth development, moving from efficiency to effectiveness to excellence, from information to transformation, moving from good to great, inspiring teachers, creativity in schools, dynamics of marriage, parenting in the 21st century, family dynamics in the 21st century, and project management. He was one of the founding members of the Association of Muslim Schools in South Africa, and he is an advisory member of IBRA, the International Board of Education Research and Resources, is also an advisory member for NIDA Trust as well, our international education network. He's also a co-author of the IBRA manuals for schools. So a big Jazakallah khair, and thank you to Ustadh Edris Khamissa for joining us all the way in South Africa. Up until recently was a frequent visitor. I don't know, maybe it's something I did or something like that, I don't know, but you haven't visited for a while. So inshallah, that's one of the promises, I think. Lots of us are making promises that after COVID-19, we're making a list of things that we're going to be doing. So I hope that visiting the UK is on your list, Ustadh Edris, inshallah. Okay, but first of all, let me unmute you and then inshallah, let's hear from you. Assalamu alaikum, Ustadh, how are you doing?
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. What could I do, man? You'll have this Brexit and everything else. And I said, okay, fine, you know. But anyway, we're going to...
Nobody's talking about Brexit anymore. Okay.
I know. I should rekindle our
so
passion
first of all,
love.
how are you doing how are you coping with lockdown?
You know, alhamdulillah, you know, it's a very challenging time. The circumstances are a bit different, but Allah is merciful. It's a gift to us to reflect on our lives, to reflect on many aspects of our life, and to reflect on our relationship with Allah, our families, and the institutions that we belong to, you know.
Yeah, inshallah. So what we will do, just to mention to those who've just joined us, inshallah, we are here, and the topic for the webinar this afternoon, or wherever you may be, actually, it might be the morning wherever you are, We're talking about rethinking schooling in the wake of post-COVID-19. So whilst we're going to talk about COVID-19 and some of the conditions we're in, we really want to focus a lot more on what happens after this all kind of, we go back to the kind of new normal, as they keep on saying. This is what we want to focus on. In particular, we want to focus on obviously the children, the teachers, and with the teachers, also the school leaders as well, and of course the parents as well. This is going to be an interactive session. So unlike last week, where perhaps that was more of a kind of presentation and a little bit of question Q&A at the end, most of this will be kind of interaction. So whilst I will be asking questions to Ustadh Edris Khamissa, please feel free to, if you want to ask a question, then you're free to do so as well. And the way to do that is as follows. If you would like, and it won't be immediately, I will let you know when this happens. We will open the floor out to this virtual audience. And if you would like to speak, then please just simply write the words "speak" in the box, in the chat box. At the moment, that all the chat, it goes to me. That's fine, and I will have a look, and then I, inshallah, will select. Alternatively, if you just simply want to, write down the question, that might be a little bit better actually. If you just write down the question, then I can go through some of the questions and pose them to Ustadh, inshallah. Okay, all right. Over to you, Ustadh Edris Khamissa.
Yes, I think this has been for many people a very, very challenging time, and for all of us. And for me personally, I'm a traveler, and so my wife doesn't have the good fortune of me spending more time than I should, and so I always tell her, darling, I'm an outstanding husband. I'm standing outside, but now, alhamdulillah, I'm there at home. And really, at this time, my heart goes out to those who have lost their loved ones, and those that are facing all kinds of challenges, and those that are separated from their family. And the critical thing about this whole lockdown is what I've seen and what I've experienced is many people are very, very uncertain about the future. Many of them are despondent, pessimistic, not too sure whether they'll have the jobs. Young people themselves are also going through the challenges. And alhamdulillah, it's critical for us, all of us, to be optimistic, because nothing happens except with Allah's will. And I've been also busying myself doing several programs for several radio stations. And the one program that I did a series on, which was, I thought, relevant, it was called Frictionless Families. And it was about an 18-part series. We spoke about family values, family goals, about forgiveness, about optimism, about empathy, about the new trajectory, about hugging your family members, and so on and so forth. And alhamdulillah, it was very well received.
Okay. Jazakallah, thank you so much, Ustadh Edris. So we're talking about rethinking schooling in the wake of post-19. What are your thoughts, your initial kind of preamble, inshallah, and then we'll move on to some questions.
Yeah, you know what? For me, I think that this lockdown has forced all of us, no matter in what walk of life you are, and especially with schools, we have to really rethink the way we are doing things. We need to rethink our relationship with our learners, because if you look at it, who are the people that are thriving today? Who are the individuals that are thriving? And we've got to ask ourselves this important question, is to what extent is our schools really preparing our children for these kinds of realities? Because this reality really tests our taqwa, it tests our relationship, it tests our optimism. And my view has always been, and perhaps this is a time that we need to reflect, and it's very, very important for us to relook at our vision and mission. And perhaps the vision and mission is fine, but maybe the vision and mission is still at the back burner. We have not really articulated it. We need to make sure it permeates all aspects of of the school activity, the important thing we got to ask ourselves, do our learners, when they leave our school, are they prepared? None of us are prepared for this reality, but are they able to adapt to new environments, you know? And I think more than ever before with artificial intelligence, and now this has been also foisted upon us, foisted upon us, that we as individuals, what has happened to us is that we are not looking at schooling to be theoretical. We need to make sure it is practical. We got to make sure that we are providing a holistic education, right? And that notion also, I think we need to look at, are our children passive receptacles of knowledge? To what extent they are participating? And these are some things we need to ask ourselves. And you know what? Gone are the days when it was enough for us to look at what is expected of us in terms of the narrow confines of teaching, in terms of grades and so on and so forth. That is not enough. And gone are the days, that notion that we should tell our children that university education is a passport to life. It's no more like that. I think our schools now need to look at how we can unleash our potential. We need to also look at, the kind of partnerships we have with our parents. To what extent these partnerships are there, they are meaningful. And the other important aspect is this, that we need to, for me personally, we need to redefine what is success. And I want each one of you to reflect and ask yourself that how would you like to be remembered by your learners? Would you like to be remembered, for example, as an individual that empowered your learner, that he became an ambassador for the Deen of Islam? Even in seclusion, he did not feel a sense of isolation because he was in tune with Allah. That even in his life, he embraced the beautiful examples of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. That he went out into the plural society, he did not feel out of sorts. He played his role and he understood that I need to be a mercy unto all mankind. And these are fundamental things we need to ask ourselves. That it'd be very sad, and I'm saying this, if we go back to our schools and it is business as usual, nothing has changed, then your learners will look at you and they'll say to you, they'll think, my gosh, did he not experience a lockdown? But what did he go through? How I wish he could be more relevant. How I wish.
Okay, Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much for that introduction, Ustadh Edris. So I think what I've gathered from there is this is almost in a way, Haji, and I think I want the teachers to think about this as well. Whatever we're experiencing now, and obviously, of course, it's with the permission of Allah, we know that. But whatever we're experiencing now, whether it's increased hardships or whether we're coping with being locked with family members or teaching or learning or whatever it may be. And of course, in this context, we're talking about learning, teaching and learning, teachers and pupils and students. Do you think that whatever we're experiencing now is almost a measure of the outcomes of what we were teaching or the way that we were conducting teaching and learning before COVID-19?
Yes, you know what? For me, I think that, this is not firstly a critique or a judgment call. And I know many of you are doing great work. But I think it's very, very important for us to continue to do biopsy rather than autopsy. I think that how people are reacting, especially our students, their fears, whatever they are going through, I think it also reflects on the efficacy of our institutions. And you'll find that from class to class, there are some students might cope better. In fact, they might even thrive in this environment. they've become self-reliant, and they are very, very creative, and they feel a connection with the family and with Islam. So it all depends, from home to home. So I think it could be an opportunity, really, to get feedback from our students. It's important for us to engage them, to get their feedback about what they felt and everything else. And I think in the end, the bottom line for me is that as teachers, you got to ask yourself in the first fundamental question: why am I teaching? Why am I teaching? Who do I regard as my ideal pupil? What attributes should he possess to reflect that he is really an ambassador for the school?
Yeah. Now, what would you say to the person who just simply thinks that they are just going to carry on from where they left off?
You know what? I'm making an assumption. If that teacher or educator was a dynamic individual who connected to the experiential of children, he connected with them, he made his lessons relevant, he empowered them, he gave them self-esteem, and such a teacher is great. He must continue on this trajectory, he'll continue to be relevant. But to that teacher who confined himself to the textbook, to the narrow confines of the curriculum that is given to him, and he believes that's a sum total of education, then I have a huge, huge problem. It is in fact what he does outside that. That's why they say a teacher is not a sage on the stage, but a guide on the side. It's a kind of lessons that he engages in, his ability to connect with each of his students, his ability to unleash the potential of each child, because academic success on its own is not a precursor or indicator of success. And that's a theme. It became almost a cliche, and people have accepted that. And it is, so we need to make sure that the child has got blood, he's got vessels, he's got emotions, and we need to also understand that he also has aspirations. And it is our capacity at the school to unleash that, our capacity to give him hope, our capacity to make him feel a meaningful part of the ummati of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then we would have won. In fact, this is anecdotal and it's not based on empirical evidence. When I look back at my students, those that have come out tops in the class, the first, second, and third, not all of them. Many of them have done well in terms of the achievement, but in the professions. But I really found the other students who might not have fared too well academically at school, who are really contributors to society, who are helping others to do great, great things. I don't make this as a generalization. And I feel, honestly, that because we give kudos to people purely, sometimes in our schools, for that academic achievement, and we do not recognize the other aspects of a student that would really help him to become a better human being, to be a contributor to society, then I think we have failed them.
Thank you. So when I know that lots of teachers are grappling with this idea of remote distance learning, lots of the teachers I know would have been part of Zoom conference calls and meetings with fellow teachers and talking to parents, etc. We're all trying to determine what it is that we should include during the day whilst we're at home. What do you think are the priorities that we should be focusing on? Is it the trying to make sure that we are still covering the curriculum that we would have been covering if we were at school? Just trying to create as much normality as possible. What are the priorities for the children?
I think, the critical thing is this. I think firstly, before you engage them, if you have done that anyway, I would like you to reflect on your own relationship with that learner. If your relationship with the learner has been distant, has been remote, you have not inspired confidence, no amount of technology is going to change that. I think firstly, you need to inspire confidence in that learner, and he or she needs to know that you're going to be there supportive of them. We need to give them hope, we need to give them optimism, and tell them that together we will go through this whole situation. And while we at it, I think it's very, very critical for us to enunciate and ask them to articulate what lessons they have learned. And they too would expect, some kind of support from home and from caregivers like ourselves. And I think it's also important for them that you, in your enthusiastic anticipation when schools are going to reopen, is to share with them some creative, great things that are going to be done at school. The whole idea, I believe, that we should, as individuals and as teachers, and especially from our leadership, is to give hope. We need to make sure that we provide a holistic solution. It must not be purely academic and a fragmented one. I think by we continuing schooling without looking at the other aspects, I don't think we are responding fully to the needs of our learners.
Yeah. Now, Ustadh Edris, whilst teachers are obviously trying their best to make sure that there is learning and teaching and learning taking place, what worries some is that teaching and learning is now being reduced down to watching videos and completing worksheets. What about the collaborative learning, all the kind of the more creative learning that we often talked about for years? Is there a danger of all of this suddenly coming to a halt?
It depends for how long it continues, you see. If you are going to do this just purely out of expediency that you have completed the syllabus, then it becomes problematic. And I think it's very, very important for me, as far as I'm concerned, that firstly, we need to rethink the whole schooling. We need to look at what values we want to really, embed and whatnot, which we can talk about a little later, and what kind of skills. So I think it's important that whilst we are going to do the Zoom conferences, it does not preclude you from doing things that are creative. It does not preclude you from, doing some kind of collaboration. I know it's a huge, huge burden on our teachers. It's not easy. And it's a month of Ramadan. They also want to fulfill the Islamic obligations. But we need to give them some kind of precursor, some kind of taste about that reality. Because what students want all the time is dynamism, dynamic teaching, and a creative teacher can make even the most sterile information into something dynamic, something that is palatable. And I think, kids themselves are resilient, and they are also pliable. They're not incorrigible like adults. And I'm sure they'll be able to attune themselves to a new reality.
Inshallah. Now, earlier on, we had a school leaders network meeting. We were talking about some research that's been conducted by the Education Endowment Foundation. And one of the things that they talked about was that there are some benefits to the current setup where children are able to work independently. But what was missing is the collaboration, the collaborative part, and actually for teachers to start thinking about how we would go about doing that. Actually, Ustadh, I want to move on to the perhaps looking at post-COVID-19. Again, looking at the children here, I'm trying to kind of structure this conversation as we took at the children, the teachers, and then the parents. Do we think there's a need for a curriculum change? In fact, schools in the UK we're halfway through a curriculum change, and nobody knew that COVID-19 obviously would happen. Do you think there's a need for a new global curriculum change? Is there something missing in our curriculum that should be there when we return?
Yes, you know what? I think, firstly, it'd be good to do some kind of SWOT analysis and to look at our vision and mission and ask ourselves to what extent are we really ambassadors of that vision and mission. We need to relook at the way we are teaching those values, teaching those skills, and we need to make sure that these skills and values are not peripheral to the curriculum. It is embedded, it is a meaningful part. And the whole—
Can I ask you, Ustadh, sorry to interrupt you. When we're talking about values and skills, can we be more specific? Are we talking about things like resilience? That's one that strikes me.
Yeah, correct. Yes, you know what? If you had to look at it, right? If you look at values, I mean, it can be any number of values. I'll just share with you a few values off my head, right? For example, the whole issue of respect. Now, this also came into play at home. And, you find that sometimes there's no respect between the spouses, children, and the parents. And how we can make sure respect becomes an integral part, responsibility of take care of their own lives, the idea of compassion, especially in this time, compassion is needed, of faith in believing that everything comes from Allah. It's about, how we do it, about commitment to do good, about love, about integrity, about resilience, about forgiveness, about self-reliance. Now, all of these things, whilst many of them are festooned in our school walls, we've got to make sure that we teach it. I like to believe, I'm not saying this as an indictment or anyone else, in a much more dynamic way to our learners. In other words, we've got to promote good. Someone said it quite nicely, the whole purpose of education must be that kids desire good, love the good, and do the good. It's about the cognitive, the affective, and the behavioral. We've got to make sure that whatever we speak about is not theoretical. And then you speak about skills, right? And there are so many skills. And I feel that every school needs to have things like emotional intelligence, self-esteem, right? And these are important things. So it's very, very critical. We need to do that. We need to develop the critical thinking of our learners. We have heard of creativity, collaboration. We need to be media literacy, flexibility, social intelligence, agility, perseverance. These are very, very important things. And now people are speaking about social pedagogy. Now, all of this is part of Islam, is part of developing a holistic human being. Today, they speak about spiritual intelligence, digital intelligence, social intelligence, and emotional intelligence. This must be an integral part of it, and our teachers themselves must be, eloquent ambassadors of that. It's very, very important that they do that, and we need to ask ourselves. The statistic I like to share, right? In post-COVID-19, who are the people that are going to thrive? Besides those that are resilient, who are those that are going to thrive in the workplace or anywhere else? Who are the teachers that are going to thrive? Who are the learners who are going to thrive? Who are the head teachers who are going to thrive? They are the ones that are creative. And a statistic that I want to share, if I could, there were 2 studies done about creativity. In one study, they tested 5-year-old kids, 1,000 of them. 98% tested creative geniuses. The same children, at the age of 10, the percentage went down to 32%. 30%. The same kids at the age of 15 to 12%. Then they tested a good few thousand adults, only 2% tested creative. So it's very, very important that the issue like creativity, the skills and values becomes an integral part. In other words, it must be about life and living. It's about relationships, how you engage with others, how do you engage with yourself, how do you have confidence in your own faith so that you are able to interact with people.
Good. Thank you so much, Ustadh. Now, I think it's fair to say that none of us are going to be the same when we return. And if we focus on the children in particular, many are saying that it is possible that many will be suffering from some form of post-traumatic stress. What initiatives do you think that we should start thinking about that we can implement when we get back? Some through some of the sort of networks that I'm part of, there have been some suggestions of things like, rather than focusing on it, sort of the kind of the English, maths, and science type of subjects, is that we need to bring in things like art therapy and subjects like that. What are your thoughts?
I think it's a great idea, and my own view is this: that when you return to school, my view is this: that the fair amount of the first week, and especially the first day, I think it's important to brainstorm, allow children to speak about their experiences, without it being invasive, and teachers themselves engage with students, with learners. So, they say that revealing is healing, is cathartic. And I think it's a very, very important. And sometimes, if you don't have the resources at school, to even get professional people to assist in that regard. And I think it's very important to build up the confidence of the learners, and to also let them know that as teachers, you're going to be there for them. So I think whatever activities you can do. But I think, honestly, that if you come back to school on the first day, and if it's business as usual, and the same thing that discussed at the staff meeting, you have the assembly, the same kind of format, and the class begins without any kind of discussion about what has transpired, then I think we have missed the plot. This is really unprecedented. I don't think even a futurist could have known that we're going to experience something like this. So I think it's important. It has given us a golden opportunity to critique ourselves, our curriculum, and to work as a team. In the end, I like to believe we want learners that are really who do well, who excel, who are resilient, people who are producers, people who are creative, and people who look back at the school and say, Alhamdulillah, and they pray for us and say, Ya Allah, forgive my teachers. They're the ones that made me understand what my purpose in life is. It was through them I was able to find my particular niche, my particular talent. And it was through them I'm able to be a contributor to society. And it's through them that I found happiness. I think these are important things, because in the end, that if we are not able to do this, then we've got to really ask ourselves, how relevant is our schools? What purpose are they serving? Are they serving a small percentage that might pursue a particular profession? Now with artificial intelligence, many professions are becoming obsolete. And now it's no more going to a physical office, working from a virtual place. So I think these are fundamental questions we need to understand, because in the end, if we are not to change, I say to people, if you love yourself, you will change. If you are not an agent of change, if you do not embrace change, then it's unlikely you can have any positive impact on your learners.
Okay, Shukran, thank you. Right, let's move on now from the learners, the children, the students, to the teachers now. And I know it's difficult to separate the two when we're talking about education, but let's focus more on the teachers now. And I think it's fair to say there's been an increase in the value of teachers amongst parents over the last few weeks. I think they've recognized actually what teachers do, and there have been obviously been some funny videos that have been passed around on social media, which are kind of highlighting the point. Now, teachers I know have had to learn new skills over the past few weeks. They've had to multitask, and as you know, as the saying goes, of you can't teach an old dog new tricks. I think we've really disproved that now. That actually teachers of all ages and abilities have really risen to the challenge, and they've learned things that they never thought that they would learn. How do you think that? I mean, that with the last few weeks as an example, how should that inspire us now to focus on lifelong learning?
I think, firstly, I think we need to give credit to our teachers. We need to affirm them. Sadly, they are the unsung heroes in our community, our society. And you find that people that are truly successful would often attribute their success to a teacher who might have given some advice, some inspiration. And these are important things. And I think at the school level, I think as head teachers, in terms of the in-service training that we do, I think we should not only confine ourselves to the narrow aspects of the curriculum. We need to look at other things to personally empower our teachers so that they'll be able to be far more positive. They'll be, in essence, the lessons in the class will be far more enriching. They'll be able to be a true inspiration at a time when our children are looking for role models, at a time when many of them sadly don't find it at home. It's not a value judgment call. They don't find it in social media. They don't find it anywhere. It's the teacher who, inshallah, can be that inspiration. That teacher who will be able to give the child hope. That teacher that himself inspires the children to pursue excellence. Inshallah, that is all. And remember this, they say that you cannot teach tomorrow if you haven't learned something today. So therefore, I know that I would also encourage teachers to become voracious readers and to continue to read, because in that way it opens your mind, it broadens your horizons.
Now, I think teachers will be thinking, actually, well, I mean, it all sounds great that we can make all of these changes, but we're going to go back to school, and there are going to be demands from Ofsted, as one of the participants has mentioned. And also there are going to be some demands from the leadership as well. What changes do you think there should be on a kind of national level here? And I know it will vary from country to country, but also what do you think leaders should be, what changes do you think leaders should be making as well to enable teachers to do those things that we've just talked about?
Yeah, you see, there are two things. The one is I can understand those demands, right? But it is precisely that when we are, sometimes I use the word advisedly, we are so obsessed with fulfilling that particular demand that we neglect what is a true education. Now, if I were to ask, if I were to advise any educational department, what I would do is I would make the following 5 recommendations. The one is, I would say that we've got to make sure that in our schools, we've got to make sure a critical aspect would be to develop the child's self-esteem, to develop his emotional intelligence, to develop his spiritual intelligence, and to make sure that the issue of values and skills are an integral part of every subject in the school curriculum.
Can I stop you there? Ustadh Edris, I don't want to interrupt your list of 5, but you've mentioned a couple of things there. I want to make sure that teachers understand what those terms are. When you say emotional intelligence, what do you mean?
Emotional intelligence, basically is the following, is that when a person, all of us at any given time go through emotions, whether you like it or not. Now, when a person that is highly emotionally intelligent, it's a learned behavior. For example, he's self-aware. He realizes, he listens to every word when he speaks. He realizes, hey, my gosh, hey, I think my tone was off. He's able to correct himself. He becomes he regulates himself. He also is able to see the impact of his words, his body language on the other person. And therefore, when he realizes the other person is feeling uncomfortable, he is able to change that. That a person who is angry disagrees, but is not disagreeable. But the beautiful part of emotional intelligence is the following, that when you got high emotional intelligence, you do not go through what you call an emotional meltdown. If you're having a marital problem, you don't tell your wife, hey, I don't know why I married you. You're able to isolate the issue, and you're able to deal with the issue, yet you are still happy. A person that is emotionally intelligent is a person that is optimistic. He knows that you cannot be unidimensional. A person understands the power of words. He knows when to be quiet and when to be silent. Is a person that is a master when it comes to be having a relationship with people from different walks of life and able to deal each one of them in their own unique fashion.
All right, I'm going to ask you now, what is spiritual intelligence now?
Okay.
Because those are terms that I'm convinced that most teachers don't know. So when, they know what IQ is. IQ, we all know, okay? And then you've mentioned very nicely what emotional intelligence is. What about spiritual intelligence? Do you need to, and there's always an argument, there's always a debate about whether you need to be religious. Are we talking about necessarily something religious or something else?
No, it can be both. But spiritual intelligence is basically having a higher purpose. It's the ability to self-discipline yourself. It's about tazkiyah, to understand what's in your heart, to make sure, to feel good for other people, to have goodness in your heart, to be able, to have not only a good opinion, but you yourself, you also check yourself in terms of your intention. You look at yourself, you feel a sense of connection with people in the real sense, that when you speak to someone, you feel truly, truly connected. You are a person that is spiritually intelligent, is a person that is present, is a person that is able to affirm others, is able to acknowledge others. It's basically about the intangibles, a person that is able to desire good and do the good. And to understand also there is a higher being that looks at who we are in the darkness and in the light.
Okay, Shukran, thank you. You can carry on with your list of 5 recommendations for.
yeah. No, okay, right. So the other very important aspect is this: that we got to ask ourselves, that we need to ask what end in mind do we have, right? We often bask about the history of the past, speak about the inventions and whatnot, and I think it's very important that instead of us having a model at school that is so standardized, that we must recognize, this is a critical thing, the uniqueness of each child. We need to recognize the uniqueness of each child. In fact, there are many gifted children who go through school life without knowing they've been gifted. In fact, teachers regard them as troublesome students, right? The other fundamental aspect is this, that we must make sure that when our teachers, when they are trained, when they go through whatever programs, we've got to make sure one of the critical programs is understanding the psychology of teaching, understanding the psychology of a child, and helping children, in essence, to deal with post-traumatic stress and also to deal with their issues. And one of my very, very popular things I often mention is, which you can speak about if you have the chance, allow children to determine the curriculum, lest the curriculum determines them.
Okay, let's now move on to the parents. And I know teachers are parents as well, okay? But I think what is unique about the situation that we find ourselves in is that for many parents, they've finally started to understand what their children have been learning at school. Whereas before, perhaps many, and of course I'm generalizing here, I'm not talking about all parents, there are some parents who are very engaged and are very up to date and aware of what happens in their child's school. But there are some parents who for the first time are getting to know what happens in school and about their child's learning. And actually, for some children, they've finally got to know their parents. What would you say about that?
No, that is very, very true. That is because, I don't think there's been a period for this duration where they've been interfacing with the children all the time. And whether they like it or not, because one of the things that is missing in our homes is emotional connection with our children. We don't have many, many conversations, as it were, and now they're forced to have conversations. And I hope, inshallah, that it is through the lockdown that the families have reconnected with each other, and the home is no more a site of contestation and struggle, but a sanctuary and a haven. And I hope that through this, perhaps parents will be far more supportive of the teachers and also appreciate them more. Because in the end, because of the absent parent syndrome, the role of the teacher has become even more daunting, even more challenging. But it has always been my view, a great teacher is a gift from Allah. And if you're a gift from Allah, you're a kind of person who will find solution. You'll make sure you provide holistic support for those learners.
Do you think this is an opportunity for parents to really have a deeper understanding about their children? Maybe not just teenagers, but really to understand what their aspirations are in life, and to be able to have an influence or guide them, talking about their own experiences. I'm talking about some things that I've been talking about over the dinner table, just what I classify as nuggets of information about just things that have popped into my head about things that it may be interactions between myself or my parents or my and things that I can share, and just some of them are just silly things as well, but we don't always get those opportunities, but those are quite deep conversations, aren't they?
Yes, they are. In fact, they say eating time is meeting time. And, they say a family that eats together, plays together, and prays together, stays together. And this is such an opportune time, especially with, sadly, and may Allah, protect all our children. There are a growing number of children that are leaving the fold of Islam, you see. And therefore, it's very, very important that just before I answer you, and before I forget this particular point, that even in our schools, it's not enough to teach them the what and how of Islam. We must also teach them the why of Islam. Why we have to pray. Why? Yes, and your point that you make, eating time is meeting time, an opportunity to connect with your kids. They must know that daddy and mommy loves them. They should feel free to talk and speak about this. In fact, there was one particular study. They studied a group of about 300 plus teenagers, and they asked them, what conversations would you like your parents to have with you? And they gave 8 topics, and and I'm not saying all 8 will necessarily be relevant in every home, but it's quite instructive. They said, if mommy and daddy are going through any problem, even a marital problem, we should be the first ones to know about it. The second thing, and not in the order that I'm mentioning, they said we want to also want mommy and daddy to talk about controversial subjects, about same-sex relationships, right? They want also a daddy and mommy to speak about why we should pray to God. Why should we pray? We like mommy and daddy also to speak about their life and the mistakes they have made, right? We do not want dad and mommy to lecture to us. We'd like dad and mom to speak to us about current affairs. We'd like dad and mom also to show an interest in our lives. Right? We'd like dad and mom to always, listen to us with empathy. So these are some of the things they spoke about. And this is a very, very important thing. That, when children do not feel a sense of connection with their own family, they would feel that connection with students. And therefore, a critical aspect would be at school is to talk to kids about what are toxic friends, what kind of friends they should have. Such friends that will help them lead a wholesome life. So so the teacher themselves, the educator has a very, very profound responsibility. And I really believe this. If we do our job, fulfill our responsibility with commitment and passion, the reward is only with Allah. I believe that completely. Our Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam came as a teacher. And also it's about how we can, I say you cannot insulate or isolate your child, but we can inoculate them. I also say Islam is a beautiful deen. We need to present it to our beautiful, innocent children in a beautiful way for a world that is going ugly. So we got to make sure the Islam, I'm not saying we change the interpretation. No. I'm saying the way we present it to our children, they must feel good to embrace it. They must feel it gives them joy to do it. It's not only about the year after, it's about life and living.
Yeah, well, it's about living, but also the other hard lesson, Ustadh Edris, is about death as well. And I think for many young people, they are having to witness the death of some of the grandparents and unfortunately some of the parents. These are obviously very hard lessons, but lessons nonetheless, thousands of children across the world are having to learn. And I suppose conversations about death that many of us just don't have. But I think talking about and coping with death, and ultimately death is something that is inevitable. It's something that our elders have witnessed, for a significant period of their lives, seeing people pass away, burying other people. But our children are not familiar with this at all. And to a certain extent, people of maybe some of our young parents as well are not so familiar. How important is it for us to share about some of those experiences to help our children to really cope in these very difficult circumstances? Perhaps our own examples of our own parents passing away I know I always get touched when you talk about your father passing away. That really is a touching story. But that's something that helps people who aren't in that situation to kind of prepare us really for that time when it comes.
Yes, you see, it's a very, very important point. And this the whole issue about empathy. You know, it saddens us. I mean, any death it's a sad loss, an irretrievable loss. And during the COVID, you know, alhamdulillah, you know, their death is not in vain. They are shaheed, they are martyrs, as it were. But a very important thing is this, is to talk about that, to make all of us understand that we are mortal human beings. The lockdown really has really accentuated and driven home this point, that we are mortal human beings, and that we need to lead humble lives, that we need to lead lives that are pleasing to Allah. And then you could say to them, you know, share the example of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, you know, in terms of his own losses in his own family. And the same token, it's very important that to allow them to speak what's in their heart. That alone is curative, medicinal, and is therapeutic. And in the end, to let everyone know that all of us are born to die. And I often share this example, you know, I share this many times about our friend Fuad Nadi. Fuad Nadi, you know, I gave him a story. I said to him that I came across this: lead your life in such a way that when you were born, you cried, people around you were smiling. That when you die, you are smiling, people around you are crying. And he said to me, his father told him the following. His father said to him, my beloved son, that when you were born, you had no idea who will come here to celebrate your birth. But you are in complete control who will come and mourn at your loss. It's about us leaving a legacy. And children themselves are resilient. Remember that. It's about how we deal with them. It's about, we must not be dismissive. It's about us reminding themselves and us about this eventual reality, and how this reality, inshallah, for a believer is something, when you do good, you look forward to it, because after all, you want to meet your Creator. It's about us asking them, you know, how did you mourn the loss of your grandfather? Asking them to share some of the stories about their positive experiences. Asking them to pray for them, to make dua for them. And it's something I think we can learn as a collective. And a loss is a loss, it's irretrievable. But in the end, these are lessons that can make us stronger and can make us steadfast, inshallah.
Inshallah, Jazakallah khair. Now, thank you so much, Ustadh Edris, for your words of wisdom. I know we haven't got a huge amount of time for question and answers. I'm so sorry. I think I seem to have taken up most of that. We have Sheikh Jahangir, who is here from Pakistan, Lahore, Pakistan, and Sheikh, I know, has been involved in some of the other networks, the International Education Network, but Sheikh Jahangir runs some schools in Pakistan. It'd be good to hear what their experiences are, and I think we as teachers in the UK, I think it's really interesting for us to hear the experiences of teachers abroad. So Sheikh Jahangir, I'm going to unmute you. Assalamu alaikum, how are you doing?
Wa alaikum salam. Alhamdulillah, how are you?
Yeah, good to see you again, mashallah. What would you like to say?
Two things quickly because of time, and we can follow up that later on in the next session, inshallah. The first thing is that we had a similar issue a few years ago in Peshawar in Pakistan when when a school was attacked by terrorists, and there were over 100 little children killed in that attack. And the schools were shut down for some time, and when the kids came back to school, I think a lot of Pakistani teachers, including myself, had a problem, had a big issue. The children were too scared to even sit in the school, even come to school, and when they have come to school, they were scared. So we had to do a lot of work with the children to normalize the situation and help them forget and move on from that big trauma, because on television they had these images, on social media the kids are being shot at, and dead bodies of kids lying all over the bloody, of bloodied floor. So I think that it's not, alhamdulillah, it's not that bad, the COVID-19 thing, but we need to prepare our teachers with proper, equip them with the things. So when they get back to school and get things, we shall get to normal in that sense. The kids coming back to school with that situation they've moved through the last few months or weeks, several weeks. So I think we should have a sessions to equip teachers to handle students when they come back. That's one. The second thing which I would like to put up here is that I think that we need to run a crash course for parents who are now handling the children on all of their own. Like Brother Edris that you mentioned, that these people, the children are, the parents now realize what teachers do. I don't really think they realize it, but a lot more teachers do than parents can realize. Only people who are parents and teachers can realize what teachers do actually. However, I think we need to run a crash course. It's like a war footing, situation, in where we have parents not at all equipped to deal with their children, and in these circumstances of the lockdown, I think we should immediately, in our own capacity, start thinking about running some crash courses. Like when they have this war and the draft comes in, and they force people overnight to become soldiers. So I think we need to teach parents quickly on how to become mentors as well. Those two things I have to say, and thank you for your time.
Okay, so can I ask you one question, Sheikh Jahangir, while you're there? So how did they manage to get the children and the teachers back to school? Because ultimately there is a link between a terrorist attack and also COVID-19. There is a fear, and what everyone's been saying is that when you have a terrorist attack, there's a kind of enemy that you can see, if you like, or there's a war against nations or something like that. Whereas COVID-19 is something that you can't see. It's the kind of hidden enemy, if you like. So there is fear, whether it's a terrorist attack or whether it's a pandemic as we're in right now. How did you manage to overcome that? How did you convince? Was it gradual? Was it phased, as they're talking about now, or?
It was gradual. We had help from the government as well, because the government asked the media to stop repeating any news or any social media news about that attack, so that they would help forget what had happened and to look forward towards the future. But it was not so easy, because everybody, when the kids went back to school after about a month, the schools had huge, walls and securities, and they had snipers on the roofs, and they had, the security arrangements they had made for any future attack. So it was difficult, and to be honest, we had sessions. It were very informal sessions with the teachers and students to help them look forward towards life. I remember one little thing I said that, do you have Wi-Fi at home? And he said, yes, I have Wi-Fi. And I said, that's as a killer as you can have, a terrorist as well, because it's cancerous as a bullet it is. So the point is that yes, it was hard, it was phased, and it took time, but it took work. And when you work, things work.
Okay, Jazakallah. Thank you so much, Sheikh. Haji Edris, I think Sheikh Jahangir has mentioned a really good point, which is, so how long have you in the same way as a terrorist attack took place in his country, and then they kind of stopped people talking about those terrorist attacks, because the more that you talk about it, then the fear increases. When schools reopen, inshallah, and when it's safe to do so, of course, when do we stop talking about COVID-19? You're saying that, we must talk about it when we go back, whether it's through assemblies or circle time, whatever it may be. Ustadh Edris, when do we then stop talking about COVID-19 and just move on?
No.
And if you can combine that with your parting words, because I know it's 5 o'clock already, and the teachers I know will have other things to do.
The thing is, firstly, it will be a crime if you don't speak about it, right? Because you're ignoring a pervasive reality. It's important to speak about it, and to speak about it in an empathetic way. And I feel, at least on the first day, we need to speak about it. And I think we as educators themselves are perceptive enough to gather from the children in terms of the understanding, and because they must get closure. closure of this thing. And every now and then we need to speak about in a positive way. We mustn't speak about it in a negative way. As a point I made in my preamble, that this is an opportunity, a gift Allah has given us to reflect on our lives. How would you like to be remembered? And so on and so forth. So I think these are fundamental things that we need to understand. And I agree with my beloved Maulana Jahangir, my beloved, I love him for the sake of Allah, right? We cannot go on talking about it because you'll be perpetuating something when people have already healed.
Yeah, subhanAllah. Thank you so much. Right, that brings us to the end, unfortunately, of our session this afternoon. I would like to thank Ustadh Edris Khamissa, who's all the way from South Africa. Jazakallah khair. And I know you had to quickly run off and break your fast. So may Allah accept your fast. And apologies for delaying your iftar a little bit.
No. I want to say to everyone, may Allah bless everyone. May Allah give you strength. May we as a collective, inshallah, be an inspiration to the Ummah and to humanity at large. Jazakumullah.
Now, next week we have, at the same time next week, 4 o'clock British Summer Time, we have the next webinar, and it's about developing children's reading habits and character. And that's going to be delivered by Dr. Muhammad Abdul Bari. And he's an educationalist, a parenting consultant, an expert, and author, inshallah. And I think we can learn a great deal from him, inshallah. So thank you once again to everyone for spending time with us. And inshallah, I know that many of you will be breaking your fast later on today. Apologies we couldn't answer some of the questions that I saw on the chat. Please forgive me, inshallah. Until next time, inshallah, jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.